All right, everybody, come on up. Thanks for sticking around, everyone. Hope everyone's having a great time. I certainly am. This is one of the coolest Bitcoin events I've ever been to. It's very cool. So good job to everybody out there. I'm Mark Goodwin, editor-in-chief of Bitcoin Magazine. I was lucky enough to be ordinal pilled by Casey from the get-go. I did my first inscription in like June of 2022. And yeah, talked about ordinal theory and all this shit for a really long time. And you know, I'm one of those, someone was shitting on laser-eyed maxis, but I'm one of those laser-eyed maxis that loves ordinals. And you know, welcome everybody back to Bitcoin. We love to have you here. So yeah, joined by some great panelists here. I'm gonna let them kind of introduce themselves really quick, and then we're gonna get into this sort of this debate, this post-mortem here. So Danny, why don't you start it off, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Danny Yang. I'm the creator of
Hold on one sec, yeah.
Okay. Hi, I'm Danny Yang. I'm the creator of OnChainMonkey. It originally was a ETH collection back in 2021, but my background, I've been in Bitcoin for a while before that, and now we're doing a great migration of that over to Bitcoin, and glad to be here.
Yeah, so I'm Psifour. I'm a software engineer currently employed with Ordinal Hub, which was acquired by Luxor, first acquisition in the space. It was exciting to see. It shows, that there may be a corporate side to all of this at the end of it. But I'm also better known as, a grumpy dinosaur who comes on Twitter Spaces and tells people if I think they're building it wrong. So for better or for worse, right?
For better. Beezy.
What's up, guys? My name is Brandon Bailey. I go by Beezy. I work in mining at Galaxy Digital. Wrote a couple reports on ordinals while there at Galaxy. And then on a personal level, I run the sub 1K Twitter account and Discord.
All right, thanks so much. Yeah, thank you all for joining us. This is wonderful. I figure it probably makes sense to start off with just like a little primer, little context for everybody about just what the hell this debate was about, and this autopsy that we're about to do here together. Danny, do you mind kind of giving a just kind of overview of sort of how we got here, why this whole cursed inscription thing exists in ordinal numbers and inscription numbers rather?
Sure. So the ordinal protocol actually is a very simple and elegant protocol, which is why we're so excited by it. It has two main parts, which is the ordinal theory, so an ordinal, and inscription, which is data that you can write on Bitcoin, and then how you can. And the third part is really how you map the two, basically an inscription mapped to an ordinal, because ordinal is the Satoshi that you own. Now, so that's pretty much the core protocol. However, when it was launched, when it was implemented, when inscriptions were enabled and people started inscribing things, inscriptions in the explorers or in the official ordinals explorer, ordinals.com, they were numbered. So there was a inscription 0, which is Casey's infamous famous skull, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and people got really excited by these numbers, and that was kind of the first, I guess you could say, meta or alpha that people wanted to get these low inscription numbers or very specific inscription numbers, like 69 or 1000.
Why 69? I don't get it.
Yeah, I don't either. 420 then. 420. So I don't know who owns 420. So yeah, people are really excited by collecting these numbers, and it really it grew ordinals because then people wanted to mint out all the early numbers. The first sub 1K, then sub 10K, and up to 1 million, and now we're above that. However,
36 million or something like that. 30-something million.
Yeah. However, as a simple, you want a protocol to be very simple and elegant, and maintaining the ordinal number was going to complicate it. And this actually came up months ago too, where the suggestion was, well, we should maybe not have these numbers, or have some way to change the numbers later. And there were some inscriptions that were not recognized, even early on. And the first solution was, well, so Casey proposed this a few months ago, which is adding cursed inscriptions, where the ones that were not recognized, they got an unstable number that was negative, and the negative numbers would change, and they have changed. The negative numbers have been changing over the last few months, and so I guess it came to a head again where the org team wants to basically make the best protocol possible and upgrade it. And Casey suggested, and also on GitHub in a discussion. So it's a discussion for all of us to kind of discuss. Well, how about let's just make inscription numbers immutable or unstable to begin with, so that we don't have this renumbering, because the number is not important anymore. And because since the beginning, many people cared about these numbers, right? Like the 69, although I don't know why.
Yeah, me neither. I'm still trying to figure it out.
Yeah. So then we have this debate. So that's why we're here today.
Yeah, wonderful. Great overview. Thanks, Denny. Yeah. Speaking of, sub 1K, that was just brought up. You're on that, right? So talk to me about sort of the side of the debate of like the market participants. What are the needs of the market participants? Why do they feel this way? Why do they think 69 is funny? Why do they want to, own these numbers? Like, kind of talk to me from the market side. Like, what are the needs of the market participants?
Absolutely. So I think in the early days of inscriptions, the inscription number was a great bootstrapping mechanism. For anybody that was looking at ordinals.com, you kind of saw like the inscription count go up. And so it was sort of this gamification mechanism in a certain sense for people that were, rushing to inscribe to kind of get in early. If you were a collector, there was sort of this narrative around like the historical significance, right? Of low inscription numbers. There's sort of, I think it's more about like the inscription ranges. Like there are certain inscription numbers that could be, rare or maybe have value due to, the meme associated with them, right? Like 420 or 69, or you could have like 777 or whatever. But I think more importantly, like people really look at sort of these ranges. So sub 100, sub 1000, sub 10,000, and sub 100K. And those ranges kind of like indicate certain like time periods, right? Which I think is why people have gravitated towards them in a lot of ways. And I think inscription numbers have become almost like an identity for individual inscriptions, or, there's a certain sense of pride, right? Like you say, I was inscription number, whatever, 600, like if that's what you inscribed. So there's a level of like sentimental value or personal value that people can inscribe to these inscription numbers. And it was also a real differentiating factor too, I think, for inscriptions that kind of helped with the marketability of them in those early days, right? Like NFTs on Ethereum and Solana, they're not numbered. This was sort of a new or unique thing that kind of provided, a different level of meta or collectability towards them. And so when I think about, why do people care so much about the number, or why do people find value? I think it comes back to, the identity piece, but also the fact that, I think like the inscription number kind of retroactively becomes a part of the art, right? You can kind of view the number as a part of the whole thing. It's a part of the art, it's a part of the story, it's a part of the provenance, right? Effectively. And so when we talked about renumbering inscriptions, for many people, it felt like we were talking about redoing provenance, which, this whole protocol at the end of the day, and what we really advocate for is like the immutability, the history, the provenance, right, of this data that is on chain, on the Bitcoin blockchain. And so that kind of, renumbering just kind of ran a little bit counter to a lot of these, elements I feel that we value so much about these inscriptions.
Great, wonderful answer. Yeah, Psifour, I'm curious. Maybe let's invert that question. What are the needs from a dev base? Why was there this even consideration at all to consider making these numbers mutable for the sake of solidly building moving forward? Like what's the dev argument? Maybe against the inscription numbers staying as they were.
Sure. So the first and foremost thing is making the number that's representative of something actually represent a measurable substance, right? So the number right now has a lot of caveats to it. So if I were to ask you what is the inscription after inscription number 70, instinctually you would say 71, but the next one on chain could maybe not be 71. It might be negative something. And this leads to confusion where people will say things like, Well, I have the 824th inscription. This is more the social aspect as opposed to the developer aspect, but they tie together because there's an educational component in what needs to happen on the development side. So to pull Mindshare in, people need to be able to understand what's happening at the protocol level very quickly, very easily, make it as easy as possible to onboard more developers to build cool things, whether that's they want to build an indexer or they want to build a wallet. Or any of the other things. I'm not saying those are the only two things you're allowed to build. Like there are actually a lot of other things you could build that make good products. But I would say we, as a community, created the perception for a lot of users who weren't staring at the GitHub, who weren't diving in deeply into the technical side, where they think that the displayed inscription number is representative of the order of the inscriptions, instead of being representative of the order of the date of inclusion within the protocol for indexing. And that, you know, we could say that's fine, which I believe that is kind of the conclusion that we arrived at after all of this. But that's something that we need to actually make a conscious decision about and have the conversations about and kind of explore, where do we as a community feel that line is? Do we feel like the education component is easier to fix? So that's the social aspect. The developer aspect is, I don't want to have to index things with negative numbers when I'm writing code. Like, obviously, I'm being facetious here. It's a little more complex than that. But at the end of the day, the more we can make the code representative of what is on chain, the better we can interact with the blockchain.
Great answer, yeah. Danny, I'm curious, like, I've heard this, idiom thrown around that inscription numbers are shit coins. Do you identify with that at all? Do you think there's any reality to it? Like, where do you stand? And I think we kind of heard both their, well-articulated kind of views on both sides here, but what do you think?
Yeah, I see both sides. I think, well, first, it's inscription numbers can be another ID for that inscription. And in fact, we were just, the previous panel was about Bitcoin as a canvas, and the inscription number can also be an element of the canvas. I mean, and, BZ mentioned it's part of the actual, the medium, but also something that's coming for, something that we've been waiting for is really more recursive endpoints, which adds a lot more power, and that's also part of the canvas. And so there could be a recursive endpoint for inscription numbers, and that becomes like a canvas element that people can build off of, in future art. And also, I like inscription numbers too. In fact, we aimed for getting one. Like the inscription 2021-9 was one that we inscribed because we were matching. We're aiming for the year 2021 and the month 9 to go with our OnChainMonkey collection. But I do also see the side of where keep the protocol simple, don't add a lot of complex code to the protocol that you have to maintain in the future. I think this if we want to do that, we should have done that a few months ago. Then it would have affected less things. But I think at this point, it makes sense to include inscription numbers in some way. And one of the proposals early on was to, well, before we can decide we're going to keep inscription numbers, well, we can also inscribe the inscription numbers so that they are all on chain and people can always reference them. They really do become immutable versus having it in the protocol, which protocol may change in the future. And there will be upgrades to the protocol over time. So the most immutable thing would be actually inscribed on Bitcoin. So that was one proposal. But I think both sides are legit.
Great answer. Yeah. We've seen now, over 200,000 cursed inscriptions. I think something like that. Is that right? It's probably changed since this afternoon. But BZ, I'm curious, like, how you view that. How do you see that? As someone who definitely understands the value of the sub 1K, what's the value of the sub negative 200K? How do cursed inscriptions play into the future sentimental marketplace of inscription numbers?
Totally. So I think with the cursed inscriptions, there was definitely a point in time where you saw like cursed inscriptions as a new meta, and it was sort of like the new hot trending thing, where you saw a lot of people kind of rush to actually create these cursed inscriptions because people were envisioning that there might be like, the first 1,000 cursed inscriptions or 10,000 cursed inscriptions, what have you. So there was a meta there for a little while. I don't think it kind of took off in the same way as like, you know, the normal somewhat sub 1K or sub 10K. But what I think is really interesting about the cursed inscriptions is that there's a very, very interesting story behind many of them in terms of how they actually got to become cursed. And so the way that I think about it is just like the point I was making about the number kind of being a part of the art. It's really like the story, the lore, the history about, you know, what went into inscribing that, or, you know, what the artist's intention was. Maybe somebody tried to get a specific number. Maybe their inscription is cursed because they were experimenting with a new way of doing something. I know like the cypherpunk ghost inscribed I think like an on-chain terminal, like way before recursion. There was a standard way to do recursion in the Ord client. And that is a cursed inscription, which is super dope, right? Like that's a super interesting story, or at least example in my mind. And there's tons of examples like this. And like from a curatorial perspective, or when I think about it from like a art history perspective, there's numerous of these stories that have yet to be told, where I think a lot of people just don't even know about the interesting experimentation that was going on with respect to some of the inscriptions there to date. And even if we bless these cursed inscriptions, which just means they'll eventually have a positive number, potentially at some point in time, the cursed inscription number associated with it will always be a part of the history of that inscription, and the story behind it will always be there, regardless of whether, you know, it becomes blessed or not or gets a positive number. So that's how I kind of think about it.
Very cool. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I'm curious, do you think there ever will be, or there ever should be, a fork of the Ord index? Sorry, guys.
No, this is actually an excellent question. Do I think there should be? I would say no. Optimally, the Ord protocol meets the needs of every application-specific tool built on top of it. This is the dream, right? This is the ideal. Could there be? There's always the possibility. I actually have a lot of faith in the current team behind it. Like Casey is a wizard. He may not be a Taproot wizard, but he is a wizard as far as I'm concerned. Raf has already proven himself to be a very capable maintainer. So I don't think it's likely or plausible, but I definitely think it. You can always go. Anybody right now could go on GitHub, click the button, and make a fork of it. I mean, do they have the technical skills to make that fork something people would want to use? That's a debate to be had. Now, to be more specific, that's, you know, can we fork it? Should we fork it? What you're actually, I think, asking is, given something like the inscription number debate, would that be a justification for a fork? And I'd say absolutely not. I feel like I was one of the stronger voices calling for this change, but not so much that I would ever say it's worth a fork of the protocol, especially in its infancy like this, over. The number is a display element. The number is a display element on an Explorer page. We have sequence numbers. If you don't like the inscription numbers, you can build an Explorer that doesn't display them. Like, you're not mandated to display them on your own personal Explorer, because there's a separation of layers in software design. The protocol is the protocol. It exists, it does its thing, it's very based in what the Bitcoin blockchain says. If you decide to go build an Explorer, or the ordinals.com Explorer is built, it can choose which parts of that data it wants to display, how it wants to display them. There's already a fork out, or a couple Explorers out there that have like full markdown with recursion support. And I say this to say, the protocol, I have full faith in the team that they'll make it robust enough that we don't need a fork, because we can build everything we need and everything we want without needing to go to that step, which is just splitting development time. It's splitting resources between things that shouldn't be split. So I'd be opposed. Like, if somebody came to me and said, hey, you want to work on a fork of Ord? I'd be like, that sounds like a massive undertaking with very little value to both the ecosystem and me.
So fork Explorers, not the index.
No, not even fork Explorers. Build a new Explorer. Build something awesome. Build an Explorer that runs on your phone and like does something new and creative. You know, make the data that exists in the protocol serve you, not the other way around.
Love that. That's great. I think one of the magical things that Casey did in regards to, like, kickstarting, people thinking about Bitcoin again, was that he completely avoided generally any sort of traditional pathway or process for Bitcoin development. This wasn't like, let me go get technical consensus, let me go get a BIP number, let me do, he just fucking built it, which is what we should all be doing. And this is a permissionless thing, and we should all find our inner Casey and stick our fingers into Bitcoin. Or whatever you want to stick into Bitcoin. Danny, I was curious, I know there is a proposal for a BIP number to kind of set a standardness to the to the ORD protocol to some degree. And kind of based on what Psifour was just saying, do you think that there's any reason to have any sort of standardness for ordinals or inscriptions in any way related to any official part of Bitcoin consensus? Is this worth at all kind of even considering that pathway, or should we continue, and I say we very liberally, continue this like total punk rock, who gives a fuck about consensus?
Are you referring to a actual BIP to change?
Yeah,
Bitcoin?
to kind of set like standardness rules for developing on top of, maybe you can clarify what I
To
mean.
the ordinal theory BIP proposal.
Yeah.
The one that's been hotly discussed in the BIP repo for months now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, I think establishing like this. I have it tattooed to my chest also, but I'll spare you the hair.
Yeah, well, I say a BIP takes a long time to get through, and it would just really bog down, ordinals. So it's great that we can do all this without any changes to Bitcoin. And also, in terms of forks, you can fork the ORD code too, and actually do lots of cool things with it without. You can do forks which still have ORD working just fine and running just fine, where like your fork actually implement new features of multi-inscription or other things that then other people can use too, and it actually still works with ordinals. Or the Explorer that you run supports other features that maybe they show the markdown in a different way that people can run, but it doesn't affect ordinals. In fact, it benefits. So that type of fork, and that's what ordinals is for Bitcoin now, where it doesn't you don't need Bitcoin to change, but you can build lots of stuff on top of ordinals on top of Bitcoin.
Very cool. Yeah. To kind of get, towards the conclusion of this wonderful autopsy post-mortem here, I wanted to ask all of you, you see this inscription number debate and, conclusion as being a marker of, the success of decentralization or the failure of decentralization? Danny, do you mind just kicking us off here?
So how we handled the ordinal numbering debate, right? I'd say at this, I think it's a success. So we have this community. We're here discussing it with the community. There are only a certain number of people who can actually work on the code at a given point in time, and they listen to everyone in the community, and they're moving forward in a way that the community wants to move forward. So I think it's overall success, and it wasn't like here I'm going to do this. And Casey proposed it in a GitHub discussion. I think initially some people read it as he was imposing his will, but it's really, here's a discussion, let's discuss it, and that's what happened. So it all worked out pretty much as planned.
I would agree for the most part. There's a couple what I consider minor things that got revealed by this. You could almost say they're flaws in our decentralized process. In that, while the entire thing was kicked off, that went well. The community voiced their opinions strongly, softly, everywhere they could: Twitter, GitHub, email, private DMs. We all went through that process, and everything there is fantastic. That's exactly how you want things to go. You want people to express their opinions, because at the end of the day, if a bunch of developers think things through, we're going to miss things. If a bunch of users think things through, we're going to miss things. If a bunch of random people even think things through, they're going to miss things. The best aspect of a decentralized system should be your humans. So we did that part perfectly. where something went odd to me was the decision was made at the end. We're going to keep the inscription numbers as is for now, stable to be more precise, as posted on Casey's blog. This is fine. We are still at a very early infancy stage of the project. That sort of final decision making being centralized is actually expected at this stage. In the future, we may see further decentralization of that. But for now, this is expected behavior. That's fine even. What worried me was seeing that that decision was made and suddenly everybody who was really deeply engaged in this discussion didn't go look at the pull requests and issues related to this, like the cursed inscription jubilee. If you don't know what that is, it's because no one has bothered to post about it on Twitter for you. Because it's there, it's in the GitHub. I have it bookmarked and I look at it every day to see who's commented on it yet. Just, if we care this deeply about how we're going to treat cursed inscriptions, about how we're going to treat inscription numbering, we should probably finish the process and not just go, Casey did the work of making the decision, so now we're going to check out mentally and no longer be involved. We're all part of the process, every single person who wants to be. So continue to be part of the process. Don't step away just because you think it's over. Like, this is the absolute infancy of a protocol.
Well said. Great. Beezy, you want to take it away?
Yeah, I would just say I kind of share the same sentiments as Danny and Cypher here. I think overall, like, it was a success. I think it was a great sort of maturity event for the community, for the protocol itself. I think going forward, right? I think I think this wouldn't have been as contentious as it was if the way that this debate would have been introduced to the community would have been a little bit different. But, like some growing pains, right? Like, I think we all kind of learned, we're learning from this process at the end of the day. Me, honestly, as like a non-technical person that's not a developer, like the whole thing kind of caught me off guard. I don't look at the GitHub every day or frequently, but I agree with Cypher. I think, like, as a person that is a part of this community and more of like a collector, like, we also have to do our part as well and make sure that we're up to speed on what's going on. But I think if I had to give like constructive criticism, it could be, how do we help to bridge the gap, right, between those of you that are technical and are developers and, people that are just collectors or maybe don't have time to look at GitHub or maybe don't even fully understand it. But, like, how can we sort of bridge the gap of communication and make sure that those other people in the community are still kind of up to speed, on just what's going on and just helping, the team be able to communicate their ideas and thoughts in a way that can, ultimately reach the entire community and maybe not those that are closest to the GitHub. So, but overall, I think it was a great success. I think it was handled well. It was great to see the community kind of come together and just seeing so many people that were passionate and care. I mean, like, if you were on any of those Twitter spaces, it was just amazing to hear so many people's perspective. It was very civil. I think people were incredibly respectful. I thought that was, just a really amazing thing to see. So I'll leave it there.
Yeah, I have to say, as someone who generally spends a lot of his time in the maxi spaces and everyone is generally not those things, like, it was actually like a pretty thoughtful, respectful conversation. So I will definitely give you that for sure. I'm actually not sure when we're exactly supposed to wrap up, but I say let's do some final thoughts. Yeah, anything that, kind of just want to, leave the crowd with here on our final moments here at Inscribing Amsterdam. I think we've all had an incredible time. It's been amazing. But yeah, any last words you want to say, Danny, to kind of lead us out here?
Yeah, well, I think that the thing that I'm really looking forward to, and many people are, is when the ORD protocol goes to the 1.0 release, because a lot of things will be settled then. But also, as a medium for art, the recursive endpoints are one of the things that can actually add a lot of power to the canvas, but also just for people building applications and programs. So that's kind of probably the most exciting thing, I think, for ORD coming up.
So I'm going to differ slightly. I actually think recursive endpoints are an application-specific thing. They exist in your Explorer. Codifying those in the as I've spoken to a couple of the other developers, is codifying those into the protocol is going to be a challenge to make them work across all explorers in the long term. But I think if we can solve that, it'll be a huge step forward for the protocol itself. It'll further, solidify a lot of these definitions. And on the inscription numbering specifically, honestly, this went way better than you could have hoped for. For a project that is, I know it seems like, oh, we've been doing this for 9 months. This should be all decided already. For a protocol to even begin being able to solidify things in a sane way within the first year is astounding. Like, there's still protocols being developed that were being developed when SegWit came out, and they're still highly unstable. So to even be approaching these discussions, be having them in a civil way for the most part, being able to explore the technical side while also exploring like the people side and the financial side in a healthy way. This has been amazing. Like, I'll happily take, the L on, I still think the numbers need to match what's on chain. But I'd rather be wrong about that and us have had this discussion in this way than the other way around and I get my way, but we do it the wrong way.
Well said.
I guess I would just conclude with one, long live inscription numbers, I guess, first and foremost. I don't know. But also, I'm really happy that this process also kind of helped solidify like the key stakeholders in terms of just having empathy, right? Have empathy for the developers that have to maintain this code base, understand, right? Like understanding like some of the challenges and issues that you guys have to go through. Like none of us as market participants would be here if it weren't for, the Ordinal team, you guys like Psifour, Danny, everyone that, is a developer and contributes to this space, right? We wouldn't be here without you, but also just having that same level of empathy and respect for the market participants that show up, that invest capital, that help to support the artist, right? We're all in this together. We're all on equal footing. So just having that mutual respect, regardless of what side of the aisle you're kind of on at the end of the day. But love this community. Happy to be here, and thanks.
Yeah, right on. Yeah, I want to say absolutely. I really, as a laser eye, whatever, really want to thank the Ordinal community for teaching Bitcoiners how transactions work, what SegWit is. Why the witness discount exists. Yeah, we really lost our way there for a little bit. And I think we're finally, hopefully we can all kind of come together, get this shit together, and we have a real enemy to fight, and we can use Bitcoin to create a revolutionary culture and economic policy and all this shit. So really from the bottom of my laser-eyed heart, thanks for everything you do. Thanks to the ORD team so much. And of course, we love you, Casey.